Morning, everyone. Paul here with GammaEdge. It is Tuesday, the 26th of April. Let's get started. Go ahead, pause it here. Please read this. It's important to you and it's important to us. When you're done, go ahead and advance. We have kind of a mixed picture building on the overall indices. We did show some very, very weak movement to the bull side here. We have a slight decrease in the SPX on the cumulative put side. So this is cumulative negative GEX and cumulative positive GEX. Small arrows, just showing a relative small amount of movement. Also seen that in the SPY, really no movement of the calls whatsoever in the SPY. Very imbalanced, as you can see, with a lot of downside protection still in place. Puts are in control, as we can see. It's very, very obvious. Same thing on the Qs and the IWM. Not really any change here on the put side for IWM, just a slight increase on the call side. The put side dropping here on the Qs. Again, very, very weak. Overall, not really any pressure one way or the other, and we're not overly excited about what we're seeing here. When we take a look at the near-term expiries, remember the SPX is a 0 DTE Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. The SPY is still Monday, Wednesday, Friday, as is the Qs and the IWM. We're between the goalposts is how we describe this. So both the SPX and the SPY, you can see the current spot price here with the little black dot. And you can see they're between the two goalposts. Not a lot of pressure. We're on the downward side of the net negative gamma here that you see for the expiring SPY. We're coming up on the zero, so decreasing pressure as we get into the transition zone. The SPX, kind of a different animal here. This is somewhat interesting in that what we're showing, and you'll see this in a little bit, is that even though we've got this net negative here, we do have some dominant calls here, so be interesting to see how this plays out here in the short term. 4320 is the area that we're watching to the upside. 434 is the area where the zero is here on the SPY. For the Qs and for IWM, we are to the left of the negative GEX goalposts, and when we have that, remember these are index equity settled. And because of that, we might see some monetization. Most likely not today, excuse me. Most likely not today. There will be no real pressure, but if we see a rapid movement up and these people feel that they're going to lose their profits because they are in the money right now, we may see some monetization, especially as we transition into this, across this barrier, across the zero here. So just pay attention to that. Pay attention to these levels, and you'll be able to watch the flow and see what's happening. When we take a look at the overall histories of what happened yesterday and where we've been, we did see the put open interest drop, and that cleared this condition that we saw on Friday where the closing price was below POI. Remember that occurs less than 1.75% of the time over about a 9-year history. Backtesting shows that that resolves itself fairly quickly, certainly within 5 days. And we'll be looking to see a potential to move up. Now, that being said, we have negative gamma actually rising above. So we have puts that are being added above where we are right now. So they're in the money, and they're the short-term gamma here. What this typically means is that we may see some downside pressure. When we see the negative gamma come up, typically it's people anticipating more downside and being able to take advantage of that. The Qs, we saw some monetization go on yesterday. The dropping GEX here, again, kind of a theme here that we're seeing. We may have some short-term put holders that are in the money, and we may see some monetization, which could actually drive things to the north, but just be aware the dropping of the negative gamma here is indicative of kind of a mixed picture over here. We've got a potential, expecting downside pressure for the Qs. The dropping here potentially due to some monetization and the fact that that we advanced, maybe we'll see a continued erosion of that minus GEX. Just know that we do have some put holders that are going to get nervous as price advances away from this, and we may see a continued push upward. IWM, note that the zero has dropped. When the zero drops, it typically means one of a couple things here, not available in this view here. But effectively, if calls were closed, that would be one way to do it, or if puts were being opened. And typically when we see the net zero, or excuse me, the zero gex drop, it does show a preponderance of downside, anticipation of the downside, so we just want to highlight that for everyone. Everything else is steady within the IWM, but this has just been a terrible index in general. Higher volatility. It's been, you can see pretty much stable until we got into Friday and yesterday's action. Taking a look at the flow summary. We did see the monetization. I know we've had a lot of questions about what we think monetization looks like, and here you go. These are the puts being closed. Calls were fairly steady and neutral on the day. Same thing over here. This is just the net of these, and you can see that we had a positive, and they color green based upon where you are at the end of the day. The Qs, we saw some monetization or closing of puts in the morning, and then we had an addition back into the afternoon. So we had, some positive flow action here that we saw, and then it dropped, but net on the day was still positive. For IWM, again, major closing that you see here, but then we had some accumulation of puts into the afternoon, driving down the overall value, being fairly just net neutral for the overall day. Takeaway from here is that without any upside participation on the calls and just a pure monetization of the puts, we think that drove the dealers to just simply buy the underlying, and away we go. Taking a look at the cumulative tick, terrible breadth. We had some sell-off days. We had a little bit of a reversal yesterday, but not enough to undo what happened in the morning. We had our continuation, which I personally like to see. I don't like seeing things reversals right out of the open, so this was good. Constructive. We're flat across the bottom, which I think is also good. Now we're starting to trend upward, which is what we want to see, right? So we want a continuation now upward of this trend. Note we are still below the historical moving averages. We've got our ways to make up here. So I think the longer term view is still downward until proven otherwise. You may want to play the downward bounces, but if we can start breaking through this area here, we might be in the setup. But we're still probably a couple days away from that. So just be opportunistic, but know that we are in a turning position. Vol, it's a really strange area to play in now. We were up above the 2.3. We've dropped back down, so we've lost part of our edge. This is a hard one to predict just because of what's happening here. You can see vol, as of this morning, had come down under the 1 standard deviation. We may get a continued collapse, and if that's the case, you could play a spread down in here. It's not strong, and so I'm not convinced this is a good setup, but play it opportunistically as you see fit. Taking a look at the SPX structures, I've overlaid all the levels here. I will just say, your eye should just scan through. There's a lot of these levels have moved down. When the levels move down in the SPX, it's closing of puts closing of calls and opening of puts in general. So just when we take a look across the structure, when we start seeing things drop down, deltas are dropping, and puts are most likely being opened and added, and so that's pulling the entire structure down. Note this confluence of levels in this area where we are. This is going to be a battle zone. If we lose this 4270, expect a downside movement again, just like what we saw earlier. So just be aware of that. We've got this confluence. On the flip side, if we can hold this area, note we've got a long ways up with devoid of a lot of levels here, and we could push higher up here in the positive trend. So just be aware of that. Expiration, still weak in the middle. Monthly for May is holding steady. The EOM decreased slightly. That could be because we moved up. It also could be because of that monetization we saw yesterday. I note very, very weak positive expiry for today, so just be aware of that. Taking a look at the 0 DTE for the SPX today, again, net positive, very weak. Don't read a lot into this. This is the new Tuesday expiries. The call levels for the expiries are fairly insignificant too. That being said, we are in this transition area here. We've got the 4190 to the downside, 4385, and you can see the different hiding areas in here. Note that COI, which is the dominant expiry for today, is also coincident with that 385. I think this is going to be fairly strong overhead resistance for today. So even though 3.5% or 3% is up here, I don't have any anticipation of actually moving up there. The same thing down here, 3% is down here. I don't think we drop below that 4190. If we do, we'll probably stall out in this area. There's nothing really pushing us south, and if we push upward, there's probably going to be a stalling here because there's nothing really pushing us there either. Taking a look at the combo, remember the combo does not include the SPY. It's just the AM and the PM settled. Big transition area, loose, very ugly. The upper 3% range is right there. I don't think we're pushing any higher than that. Note we are still in a very negative gamma condition across the entire complex. Very large number here. You can also see down here, by the way, we're growing in the amount of what we're seeing here in terms of expiry for May. Rather than just call out all these various levels, your eye can see them. I would ask everyone just to refer back to them to keep the charts fairly clean, but you can see the levels. And if you're having trouble reading the numbers, you can open it up and should be able to explode it to your full screen view. I have saved this in high resolution, so you should be able to see everything. A lot of red, few flip areas in here, just be aware. But you know, in general, we've got some key areas, as I said, down here in this 4275. You can see that a lot of delta down there. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. So checklist for the trajectories on the bullish side. The cumulative tick is stabilizing horizontally and it's moving up slightly. That's good. The Qs and IW arm to the left of that negative gamma exposure on the 1 DTE. The SPX needs to hold this 4270, 4285 below us. It's a key area. The VIX and the VVIX may be collapsing, so watch that. And then when we are within that transition zone on the SPX for the 0 DTE, we could push higher, could push lower. Just wait and see what happens there. From a bearish perspective, the cumulative tick is in a long-term downtrend. Just be aware of that. We've got many days before we get out of that status. We did not see any call accumulation of any significance across the index ETFs. That's usually not a good thing. GEX typically goes, or price goes where GEX goes, and right now it's going down. So just remember that. And then we are within the transition zone on the 0 DTE. It's a weak zone. It's loose. I would expect to get whipped around. Added the levels over here, rounded them as necessary, just so you don't have a whole bunch of decimal points. And just the key takeaways here are that we do have those key areas here in the 42, 85, 75, and 70 zone. Just pay attention to those. I think that's either support, and if we fail it, then it becomes overhead resistance. So that's it for today. Come join us at GammaEdge.us. If you click on that or put that in your browser, that'll take you to a sign-up page, 14-day free trial, all the tools turned on. Great group of traders, all experience levels, all ages. Go for it. It's a good place. Follow us on Twitter, please, at GammaEdges with an S, and on YouTube, of course. If you liked what you saw today, hit that like button, please. It helps us out, and subscribe. That also helps move us up, and we need to get to 1,000 subscribers to take this to the next level. So we're a little more than a third of the way there. So appreciate everyone's time. Make it a great Tuesday, and we'll see you in the Discord.